Colleagues, just to draw your attention, we intend starting in literally 2 minutes, 120 seconds. So please, council members, come into the room, take your seats, please. We'll be starting in 115 seconds.
Hi, everyone. Very good afternoon to everyone. Maybe we should get it started. Please take the seat. We have a wonderful 2 guests to this council this afternoon. Good. Okay, so the first item of this afternoon is our conversation with conventions. And luckily, today we have 2 heads of convention, the convention head at the CBD and also the Minamata. So we would like to have a very interactive conversation with them. I would like to first say this way. We are here to serve the conventions. For the last Gef 6 and also going for Gef 7, we have been thinking a lot about how we can maximize the impacts of out of our limited resources. So one way we are trying to do is, can we really integrate our program to maximize the impact? It has been a bit of the kind of innovation during the Gef 6, and we were going into a very big way for Gef 7. But during the discussion of the replenishment, and now there is always a question that is this really the best way to serve the convention? So this is really a good opportunity for us to hear directly from head convention that how they see that the progress of the Gef 6 and how they see that our program for Gef 7, and if we could really work together to find the best way to serve for the convention, that would be really, really great. So I would like to first introduce that Christiana Pasca Palma. She is the Executive Secretary of Convention of Biological Diversity. She is not an alien, a stranger to us anymore. She has already taken the floor several times. But I just would like to reflect how we met the Christiana, how I met Christiana. It was actually that even before you officially took the office, and it was Cancun and the CBD COP, and it's a COP 14, 15, 13. And then I really enjoyed the conversation with her about how we could really do that in a system change. And since then, I'm really, really excited always about talking to her and then her idea, her vision, how the Gef can actually also work with her to realize her vision. So without much ado, I'd like to pass on this to Christiana. Christiana, you are on.
Thank you very much, Naoko, and dear Gef Council members. It's a great pleasure to be with you today, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to share some reflections I was asked to reflect on two things. One, key reflections from the Gef 6 period, and then, of course, priorities for Gef 7 and the future. So with regards to the first question, I want to touch on two major areas: strategic direction and institutional strengthening. With regards to strategic direction, I would like to say that the Gef 6 covered the middle period of the CBD Strategic Plan 2011-2020 and was essential for the implementation in this decade. There are a few remarkable things about that. First of all, Gef has been advancing its Gef 2020 vision in areas of great importance to the CBD. This is the first time that the Gef has ever tested a longer-term perspective that went beyond the replenishment cycle, providing an opportunity for establishing a long-term alignment between CBD strategic planning and Gef programming directions. The experience gained will be very useful for considering longer-term financial support in developing our post-2020 biodiversity framework. Gef 6 also tested 3 integrated program pilots on food security, cities, and supply chains. The concept of integrated program pilots was also well received by the convention. And I would like to mention that in decision 1321 of the Conference of the Parties in Cancun that Naoko referred to, the parties decided to encourage the Global Environmental Facility to continue and further strengthen integrating programming as a means to harness opportunities for synergies in implementing related multilateral environmental agreements, as well as the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Second point, it's related to the fact that nearly all national biodiversity strategies and action plans, revised and updated in the United Nations Decade for Biodiversity, have been finalized during the Gef 6, and implementation of these national level strategies and plans is now in full swing. Thirdly, and very importantly, working closely with the Gef Secretariat, the Convention adopted guidance for a 4-year framework of priorities to guide the Gef 7 cycle. With regards to institutional strengthening, another area of development during Gef 6 is the expansion of the Gef partnership into national level institutions and other organizations. These have significant financial capacities. For the first time, I think the Gef initiated the consideration of funding needs of all biodiversity-related conventions, and that was very important for us. Now, with regards to the second question, and coming to the Gef 7, let me say that the 13th meeting of the Conference of the Parties in Cancun adopted the consolidated guidance to the financial mechanism, including the 4-year framework of program priorities for the 7th replenishment of the Global Environmental Facility. We are pleased that the Gef 7 programming includes both core funding for the CBD focal areas, as well as strong financing for 3 integrated programs, all of which have direct relevance to the Convention. And we are very pleased to see the increased level of funding for biodiversity, given the continuing challenges we are facing to reverse the current trends of biodiversity loss. Naoko and I had many discussions over the last year since I took my mandate about how to ensure that we have adequate financing for biodiversity, not only directly, but also through integrated programs and synergies. And I'm going to speak a bit more about that. Bottom line is that we still have 2 years to implement the current strategic plan and the DİCH targets. So my message is to all countries to try to accelerate the efforts, and I think we can still make some good progress. With regard to enhancement of the national implementation of the Convention strategic plan, we do have 2 more years left. That seems not so much, but I think it's a good time to take more actions. And continuous support from implementation of the strategic plan from Gef, it's very, very much needed. Continued attention of the Gef is also needed for the implementation of the 3 protocols. Let's not forget that the Convention has also 3 protocols, namely the Cartagena Protocol for Biosafety, Nagoya Protocol on Access and Benefit Sharing, and the Nagoya Kuala Lumpur Supplementary Protocol on Liability and Redress. Although parties are advancing with implementation, I think there is a strong demand for more project support. Well, while we spend a lot of time, in a way, focusing on implementation and accelerated implementation of the current strategic plan, obviously the reflections are already starting for the post-2020 global framework and the direction we need to take there. I think it is, we will have more details about the status of implementation of Aichi in the coming year, but from early indications we know that while we made some progress in some of the targets, we will not by 2020 be able to meet all of them 100%. So that's a basis that we have to take into account when we look into post-2020 and to also analyze what has worked, what hasn't, and what lessons do we need to take forward. Among the 47 African countries with revised national biodiversity strategies and action plans, 62% of them, 29 countries that is, have time horizons up to the year 2020. So therefore, new or updated planning document will be needed in these countries post-2020. Other countries will also need to realign their national planning documents with the post-2020 biodiversity framework. And the generous allocation of $50 million for planning for the 7 replenishment will be very important in this regard. A challenge is how to reduce the time for planning and allow more time for implementation. And that's an important point, again, to take on board, because whatever the new architecture of the post-2020 will end up being, we would like to ensure that most of the time and energy and focus will actually go in implementation. At our upcoming COP in November this year in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, parties will launch a process to establish the new global biodiversity framework that will be adopted at COP15 in Beijing in 2020. And this will be indeed a crucial moment for CBD to hopefully shift to a more transformative approach towards biodiversity. So what do we mean by that? It's that, as I think Naoko has also tried with the Gef 7, we have to recognize that biodiversity is interconnected pretty much with everything we do. We have decisions from COP13 in Cancun on mainstreaming biodiversity into the forest, agriculture, fisheries, and tourist sector. And in Egypt, we'll discuss mainstreaming biodiversity in infrastructure, energy, mining, oil, gas, health, and manufacturing. So between these two COPs, the parties have decided to mainstream biodiversity in major economic sectors. I think the question is, how do we do that in practice, and how do we ensure that we have the adequate financial resources to get to results? And it's not an easy task, as you all, I think, appreciate. So in that sense, and from that perspective, I think some of the reflections and thinking for post-2020 is to have an integrated, a systemic approach, in fact, towards biodiversity and recognizing it as the essential asset and capital that supports sustainable development as well. So we will hopefully see a lot of consultation and reflections in the coming 2 years as we prepare to design post-2020. But the systems approach, the transformational change, is one key element of conceptual approaching biodiversity, with a view that hopefully by 2030 or 2040, in the next years, we will achieve more tangible results that we have had in the last efforts in the current decade. So with that, I thank you very much. We have a very good collaboration with Naoko and the Gef Secretariat, and we look forward to continue to work together and to also reflect on how do we mobilize more resources for this important agenda, because we all know that while the Gef allocation is quite generous, it's not enough to address the scale of challenges that we have. There are lots of resources available in private sourcing, and I think those were probably not enough tapped. So one area of reflection when it's coming to resource mobilization would be how to perhaps blend some of the public funds to unlock and mobilize private sourcing to fund this agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Christiana. I actually remember that my last conversation with you is actually how to mobilize resources and the kind of, through the blended finance, because we see a lot of interest from the private sector to fund. So that let's continue to have that conversation. I know you have a lot of questions for Christiana, but before I open the floor, I would like to also introduce another the wonderful guest to us. In fact, maybe she may be new to some of you because she has just taken office 2 months ago, even if you said that you feel 2 years already. So that another guest is Rossana Silva Repetto. She's a new executive secretary for the Minamata Convention. And so that as you may know, that as you may remember, that the Minamata Convention entered into force last year, and even before that, we have had several good programs and projects. And one of my favorite is actually that you may hear that at one of the convention that now Gef Gold project, which is basically linking up from indigenous community of say Latin America through to that from that gold refinery in Switzerland or Italy and going to the consumer. One of our dreams is how to really clean up that dirty gold supply chain to become a cleaner gold supply chain. And I know that under her leadership there may be more and more interesting projects coming. So Rossana, please, and then address to the council.
Thank you very much, Naoko, for this introduction. I am, in fact, very, very pleased, and I thank you, Council, for the opportunity to address you in relation to the Minamata Convention this afternoon. As Naoko mentioned, I joined the convention as Executive Secretary only 2 months ago. But I'm new to the Minamata world, but I'm not new to the UN. I've been with the UN for more than 24 years already. Yes, but I'm very, very happy to be now part of the Minamata family and to be here this afternoon with you. The Global Environment Facility has been a long-standing partner for the Minamata Convention, as you mentioned. The journey of the Minamata Convention has been one, in fact, made hand in hand with you, with the Gef, and with the invaluable support of the Secretariat, for which we are very grateful. Thank you very much. 2017 was, as you are aware, a very important year for the Minamata Convention. It entered into force in August, and we already held the first meeting of the Conference of the Parties in September. As part of the financial mechanism of the Minamata Convention, the Global Environment Facility fulfills a critical role in supporting the implementation of the Convention. The Gef has been an indispensable partner for countries to ratify the Convention, because as you said, the work of the Gef started even before the Convention entered into force, and again, for this, we're very grateful. Your work has in fact been indispensable, as I was saying, for the ratification of the Convention and for its rapid entry into force. As of today, there are 93 parties to the Minamata Convention, the latest ones being Iceland and India. Just a couple of weeks ago, India last week, so congratulations and thank you for being part of the Minamata Convention now. After less than a year of the entry into force of the Convention, we can see a very good pace of ratifications in all regions. And I would like to recognize the role of the Gef in this regard, once again. The support of the Gef, which started with projects already under Gef 5, continued under Gef 6 to cover not only enabling activities on mercury, but also a number of projects contributing positively to the reduction of mercury use, emissions, and releases to protect the environment and human health. $141 million were funded by Gef 6 for mercury-related projects. Gef 6 has provided an opportunity to build a strong and solid foundation for the ongoing implementation of the Minamata Convention. It is exciting to see virtually all eligible countries undertaking enabling activities, in particular through the Minamata initial assessments. The Gef, in fact, supported 110 countries to implement these assessments. Many countries have also commenced work in relation to artisanal and small-scale gold mining, with 32 of them developing their national action plans. It is also exciting to see mercury being tackled in a number of large projects as well. But even more promising is the development of a programmatic approach to work. The cooperation between implementing agencies and the opportunities for agencies to play to their strengths within a coordinated cluster of activities is a good way forward, which reflects the cooperative and supportive spirit which has been key to the success of the Minamata Convention. And I am particularly pleased to refer in this sense to the Gef program called the Global Opportunities for the Long-Term Development of the Artisanal and Small-Scale Gold Mining Sector, known as the Gold Program. Yeah, it's called the Gold Program, not only because it refers to gold mining, but also because of the initials of this long title of the program. And it relates, well, as I said, it relates to gold, and it's very, very nice to make the reference to the Gold Program. What is also unique about this Gef Gold Program is that it truly shows how the Minamata Convention is not only a chemicals convention per se, but a real environment and health convention. In fact, it touches on many aspects of sustainable development. 4 Gef agencies are working together in the Gold Program. It's Conservation International, UNDP, the UN Environment Program, and UNIDO. And the program benefits 8 countries in various regions. To be highlighted as well here is that the Gef Gold Program has a strong private sector engagement, including major jewelers, electronic manufacturers, gold refiners, and potentially even commercial banks. It is an opportunity to further attract the private sector and create an environment where the public and the private sector can work together to support communities working in small-scale gold mining. Under Gef 6, we address 2 of the largest priorities in the implementation of the convention, which are artisanal and small-scale gold mining and vinyl chloride monomer production. Looking forward for Gef 7, our priority is to have a balanced program of activities which tackle key identified issues in support to the implementation of the convention. We expect to address other key sectors which are large users of mercury and thus produce large emissions of mercury. And these are the fields of primary mercury production, dental amalgam, chloralkali production, non-intentional releases, products containing large amounts of mercury, like thermometers, blood pressure measuring devices, cosmetics, and so on. Our joint focus on the successful implementation of the convention will lead to reductions in mercury emissions and releases, therefore avoiding human health issues and improving environmental conditions. I am convinced that with the support of the Gef, parties will be able to make progress and over time make mercury history. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Now you are waiting for this moment, and the floor is yours for the question, reflection, comments for 2 head of conventions. Marita, please. Sweden.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank for the excellent reports presented by the 2 conventions, and congratulate. I mean, my comments will apply to all the works by all the conventions. So, but I am directing my comments at the 2 representatives here. But we are very pleased with the efforts that have been taken to strengthen the integration and synergies within and between various conventions. And we think it's very important that the valuable work and dialogues initiated during the Gef 7 period of the replenishment, that we continue that also now throughout the implementation of Gef 7, because I think that was a very valuable exercise. We would also like to encourage both the Gef Secretariat and others to continue the close dialogue with other climate funds to maximize complementarity and coherence. And I think we brought this up many times, but I think it's going to continue to be very important. And one of the priorities of the Gef, given the large reduction in climate allocations compared to Gef 6, should be to further identify possibilities of close cooperation with, in particular, the GCF and the possibilities for scaling up successful Gef projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Marita. Now I want to call on Kojura, followed by Manrique.
Well, I thank the two representatives from the conventions for their reports. In my response, I will also refer to the subject on the agenda as a whole, which was called Relations with the Conventions and Other International Institutions. Germany welcomes the Gef's efforts inter alia through the approach of integrated programming to create synergies between the various conventions for which it operates as a financing mechanism. In this sense, we also encourage to further intensify cooperation and coordination of Gef with other financing institutions to these conventions, such as the Adaptation Fund and the GCF, with a view to maximizing complementarity and coherence, as also already said by Marita. With a view to the Convention on Climate Change, we would appreciate more information on quality and quantity of the support the Gef actually provides for assisting the countries in implementing their NDCs, as well as the collaboration of the Gef with the NDC partnership. With the view to the Montreal Protocol, we would welcome the expansion of the cooperation with the Montreal Protocol and the Strategic Approach to International Chemicals Management, SAICM. And we would also welcome the expansion of the cooperation of the Gef with the UN Forum on Forests. And in this context, particular attention should be given to the support of the first ever UN strategic plan for forests as an opportunity to further enhance coherence, coordination, and synergies, and to the implementation of global forest-related issues. We would also welcome continued action in a joint work plan of the collaborative partnership on forests, CPF, in implementing the strategic plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Kodura. May I call on Manrique, followed by CSO representative.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Naoko. We agree with the comments heard so far by Marita and Kodura in relation to the importance attached to the need for Gef to further strengthen their relationship with other organizations, especially in terms of the Green Climate Fund and the Adaptation Fund, given particularly the reduction in the budget that has been foreseen for the next cycle. And we believe that the complementarity with both organizations is indeed very important. Now, in relation to biodiversity, I'd like to make a comment regarding my experience as a representative to the FAO, which is one of the very many organizations who are encouraging this mainstreaming of biodiversity. And given the importance for the availability of a greater number of funds and resources, I believe too that it's important to have new ideas. And I remember a debate within the scope of the FAO when I was based in Rome, in which attempts were being made to identify the linkages between diversity and markets. And having had personally some previous experience at the World Trade Organization, I would like to quote that example in isolation. It was a rather complex discussion because at first hand, what one could arrive at as a conclusion was that the trade could harm eventually biodiversity. And that, of course, well, I would say that, of course, there are no countries in the world that are not interested in trade. And at the same time, biodiversity is a problem that is of great concern to us all. So how can we go about this problem and dealing with this problem? And Christiana mentioned in terms of the production, energy, transportation, but all these issues are linked together with not only just production, but also consumption and thus trade. So I believe what's important here is that as well as having funds, we need to have new ideas and a new perspective. That is, from my point of view, I don't think we have arrived at that stage yet as to how biodiversity, how can we complement it and how can we establish this linkage between these 10 or 20 different kinds of problems. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now let's hear from a CSO representative, followed by Jos Belgium.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to speak. And CEO from Republic of Palau. The Gef CSO network, having reviewed document Gef C5415, Relations with Convention and Other International Institutions, makes the following comments and recommendations. We welcome the stakeholder engagement policy, the Gender Equality Action Plan, and the work being done by Indigenous Peoples Advisory Group. We, however, recommend that more detailed information, quality and scope of participation be enhanced in the spirit of Agenda 2030 to leave no one behind. CSO and Indigenous peoples are included to ensure awareness and education on all conventions to small communities and relevant stakeholder groups. We recommend the following actions be taken to ensure effective integration and implementation of the conventions. A financial mechanism is created to ensure support for capacity building on providing awareness and education on the conventions, especially gender budgeting programs and projects for conventions regarding chemicals such as POPs and those in Minamata. More research is required on chemicals and its effect on natural resources, wildlife, human health, especially vulnerable groups such as women, youth, children, and people with disabilities. To improve the attention on the implementation of projects in relation to POPs chemical disposal, and pay attention and implementation to the control of substance and chemicals in everyday use product, especially for children and women. And finally, to pay more attention to cleanup and restoration of contaminated sites and hotspots. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now I want to call on Jos from Belgium, followed by Jan Peter.
Thanks. Good afternoon, and welcome to the executive secretaries, and thank you for your address here. And the points you raised, we are very happy when we regard to the CBD. And the relationship with its financial mechanism, I'm always saying that that's the example, should be the example for all the others. We had back in 2008, we elaborated the first 4-year framework on program priorities with your predecessor, by the way, Braulio. He was a negotiator then. And ever since, this has been, it has proven to be very useful, both for the convention and for the Gef, and has improved also. Each iteration of that has been better. And so we agreed the last one 2 years ago. So the upcoming COP here in Sharm el-Sheikh will be sort of like a midterm appreciation. It's not a real evaluation, but appreciation of how things have evolved, have progressed, and how the Gef activities are corresponding to the COP guidance. We have this in the document, and it will be before the SBI next week, or 2 weeks from now. And so we look forward in looking into that. Madam Executive Secretary, you mentioned that Gef 6 was in the was serving sort of the mid part of the strategy. That's true. And I want to make a point of the challenge ahead. It's always better to look ahead than backwards. Backwards is okay, so we don't have to worry. Why am I saying that? You, if I understand your the next strategy will be approved in 2020, and the challenge will be, so how can the Gef adapt to that? Because 2020 will also be the year that we give the guidance for Gef 8, right? But the strategies will be in the making, and the replenishment process will be about to start. So and as things evolve, I hope I have good hopes for that, because I know that the secretariats work together very well, and that's why we've had this 4-year framework always as a good result. But I'm just mentioning this. I won't be there anymore, so don't bother. I won't run in your way. But I think it's important to start thinking, reflecting upon it, and continue the good practice. Welcome to the Minamata Executive Secretary, and yes, you have highlighted all the things that the Gef has done long before the Minamata Convention. Well, it was still in the intergovernmental negotiating process, and then since the ratification, mainly on enabling activities. It's something that is also important part of the track record of Gef, because Gef has done that exactly the same way with the Stockholm Convention. And those are the two new kids on the block for the Gef, because climate change and biodiversity existed before. And desertification is another type of relationship altogether. But, so we're very happy that, the countries are well on their way, first ratifying and then starting to make their planning and so on, and they will have strong support on the Gef 7. So we're looking forward to developing that, and by the way, also that COP2 adopts the MOU with the Gef, which didn't happen last time. I'll leave it at that, but I still have points to make on the other issues under the agenda item. I hope that's still possible.
Thank you, Jos. Now I want to call on Ian Peter from Norway, followed by Paola.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks to the two secretariats. Actually, the Minamata experience is interesting, because the GF has been able to be proactive. And I know this is not only rhetoric, because my Minamata people at home telling the same story. So we can all be quite pleased with that, I think. Now, again, our intervention will deal with the way GF is moving into new territory and more integrated approaches. And there's an interesting chapter here on engagement with conventions to facilitate synergies on page 10. And we would suggest that in future reports, this section could be expanded somewhat to describe, at least with a few examples, how policy advice from different conventions are analyzed together and used to actually design integrative programs and find synergies. I would note this could be important also in the context of more for less money, like we now are trying to achieve with the climate area, which is challenging and which some people actually pose some questions to. In the same vein, we have read with interest the section on the Green Climate Fund. Also important in a situation where GF funding for climate is stagnating, and we stress our appreciation of attempts to bring focal points at country level for these two instruments together with a view to a more coherent or even joint programming. And we note with interest in the paper the idea of countries and agencies summarizing their respective GEF and GCF support to enable better tracking and also identify opportunities for linkages. Finally, we note the update provided on the UNCCD Land Degradation Neutrality Fund. This update is not very comprehensive, and we would appreciate more information on how the Secretariat sees the L&D fund evolving in Gef 7 and the nature of Gef's relationship with this fund. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now I want to call on Paola, followed by Greg.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the update we received on the conventions. This agenda item raises the more general issue of the GEF navigating an evolving institutional architecture for the global environment and for sustainable development, where a multiplicity of international agencies and conventions calls for enhanced coordination and cooperation, as it has been noted already. And again, as it has been mentioned by many, there is first of all a need to ensure effective division of labor and collaboration between the GF and the Green Climate Fund, and we'll have to deal with that. I'm going to take this opportunity to also mention another international convention with which we would encourage the GF to explore collaboration, and that is the Convention on the Protection and Use of Transboundary Watercourses and International Lakes. Since more than 40% of the world population relies on transboundary water resources, this is of course an important issue. This convention may be seen as an instrument for global water diplomacy, so to speak, in particular since it became a universally available legal framework for transboundary water cooperation worldwide. So we would encourage developing relations with this front as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I now want to call the Greg, followed by Johanna.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the Executive Secretaries of the CBD and the Minamata for the presentations. And we know you have some important meetings coming up this year, and we look forward to working with you, starting in Montreal in a couple of weeks with the CBD. So Canada is pleased to note that the consultations on the Gef 7 replenishment process were carried out with the conventions. I think there was a bit of a slow start, but certainly that picked up, and we see that reflected in the programming and policy directions document. So we do appreciate that there's been a very good job of reflecting the convention's priorities. We're pleased also to note the ongoing collaboration between the Gef and the Green Climate Fund, which is an important relationship given that both financial mechanisms are part of the UNFCCC. Of course, we discussed the evolving climate financing architecture throughout the G7 replenishment negotiations and the need for Gef to use its comparative advantage and unique niche. So that's going to be, in one sense, a challenge, but a very important one, that we situate Gef properly within the climate architecture, and that's likely to continue and to evolve as well. So we encourage continued efforts to ensure complementarity. We'd be interested in hearing more about the exercise being conducted between the Gef and GCF focal points to explore the possibility of collaborative programming which takes into account Gef's niche in the global financing architecture. We also look forward to discussions, as mentioned by the CBD Executive Secretary, on the post-2020 period, both in biodiversity and within the chemicals and waste cluster. As a financial mechanism for 3 conventions under those focal areas, we expect that the Gef will continue to play a key role in supporting implementations of the legally binding obligations under the respective treaties during that post-2020 period. At the same time, we recognize that there will be challenges. For example, as Joseph Belgium has mentioned, the Gef operates the financial mechanism of the Minamata Convention, has received guidance from the COP, but we haven't been able to come up with an MOU yet. The legal advisors have determined that it's not absolutely necessary, but nonetheless, it does show that to a certain extent the multilateral system that we're involved with is vulnerable, and that we need to work hard in order to make sure that we continue working together for the benefit of all our countries and the global environment. We also have to express some regret that as a result of the Gef 7 financing is a little bit lower than Gef 6, the Biodiversity and Stockholm Conventions will receive slightly less. Now, it's not necessarily a material amount, but the message, of course, at those COPs is going to be, there's going to be some difficult conversations just based on what will be seen as a possibly emerging trend. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us to remember the importance of those conventions and the importance that Gef plays in financing those conventions. But notwithstanding the challenges, we strongly support the Gef's work going forward. We can't forget that Gef is a key source of climate financing and is the most important source of financing for the other challenges that we're addressing on biodiversity, desertification, chemicals, waste, and international waters. Thank you.
Thank you so much. May I call on Greg, followed by Ulazista. Okay, Johanna first.
Thank you very much. I thought that you were going to skip me. Well, no problem. Thank you very much for the presentations. We welcome, we're especially pleased with the strengthened cooperation between the Gef Secretariat and the Convention Secretariats. We are delighted to note that the Executive Secretaries took up the integrated approach as well as the synergies between the conventions. We consider it important to take a holistic approach to biodiversity as well as chemicals and waste focal areas. Our constituency has supported synergy work, and we are happy that it is bearing fruit. We'd also like to support what Germany took up with, concerning coherence and complementarity. Thank you very much.
Thanks much. Now, may I call on Ulajislav?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And also I want to thank you for the document and your activities to foster cooperation with the Convention that make good links for all of us. And as all we know, Gef serves as a financial mechanism for 5 conventions, which is duly way assist countries to meet their requirements under mentioned convention. Moreover, UNFCCC COP23 in its guidance addressed to the Gef to continue promote engagement with the private sector to support developing countries to foster innovation and investment. Taking into account that climate change focal area allocation was reduced in the light of complementary to programming by the Green Climate Fund activities that cause an absence of support for such countries, for example, as Ukraine, which is implementing Paris Agreement, and climate change is a key priority, which is also adopted by our government. Please note that there is some countries that are not eligible to Green Climate Fund, in particular Ukraine. So In other way, I want to say that existence of Green Climate Fund does not have to impact on the Gef activities, which are support other countries who is out of GCF system. Thank you.
Thank you. May I call on Brian, please?
Thank you. We would like to thank the Gef Secretariat for its extensive coordination and proactive engagement with the MEAs. We urge that the Gef Secretariat, when reflecting decisions of the parties in reports and documents, continue to use the precise text of the final decisions taken by the parties rather than characterizations of decisions or advanced versions of decisions. Finally, it's very heartening to see that the work of the MEAs continues to evolve, reflecting the ongoing enhancement of international cooperation on environmental issues and the continued recognition around the globe of the importance of working together to achieve global environmental benefits. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now it's time to ask two ladies to respond or to share your reflection.
Thank you very much to all of you for this very good comments, and what I hear as a thread coming through almost all positions taken is the matter of enhanced cooperation, coherence, working together, synergies, and the good collaboration indeed that we have with the Gef Secretariat that needs to continue in the future, but also more emphasis on integrated approaches. So I'm very happy that Canada is recognizing that we have arrived at I think, quite a good outcome with regards to biodiversity compared to where we started in the beginning, at least when I took the mandate, and that's the result of indeed a lot of consultation and discussions with our colleagues in the Secretariat. I want to pick up on a point that was made by the representative from Argentina, and the fact that we really need new ideas as we are reflecting what to do with biodiversity, which is all life on this planet, in the forest, in the oceans, in the soil, and that's supporting all of us here. What approach can we take in post-2020, again, to perhaps be a bit more successful in the coming decades, knowing very well what the science is telling us, because if we look at the scientific projections and modeling, under the business as usual scenarios, that is the way we operate now in the world, by 2050 the loss of biodiversity would be so dramatic that can cause catastrophic collapse of the ecosystem services. And of course climate change and all the other environmental problems are exacerbating this, because the planet is just one. It's a system of systems that doesn't take into account all our administrative boundaries and conventions and everything else. So I think perhaps it's time that we do have a bit of a mental shift, a paradigm shift in the way we consider biodiversity that should go beyond species protection or protected areas, and more into acknowledging that this is a capital that, if it's not taken care of, would undermine not only our development and well-being, but perhaps our own survival on this planet. So from that standpoint, indeed, we do need a lot of new thinking, fresh ideas, creative ideas, to first conceptualize the architecture of the post-2020, and then, of course, creative ideas in terms of mobilizing the resources to implement it. We had a good strategic plan, 2011-2020. We had well-thought, well-crafted targets, of course, that could be perfected, especially when it's coming to indicators and monitoring. But the bottom line is that where I think we are perhaps collectively failing, if I dare to say that, it's in the implementation. So whatever post-2020 will look like, will have to have a strong focus on implementation. And again, here the resource mobilization, not only financially, but capacity building as well, interacting and bringing biodiversity at the center of policy decision making, perhaps from a whole of government approach, but also economic considerations, because a lot of the destruction that we see, it's in fact lying at the heart of the economic development model. So there is a lot to reflect on, and a lot of, I hope, good consultations that we will have with all of you, with the scientific community, with the business community, with the civil society, indigenous people, because at the end of the day, this is our planet, so we all have a stake in it and a responsibility. So with that, thank you very much. I hear a lot of good support for all the conventions and for the work with the Secretariat. And we will continue to work with Naoko and her team to see how creatively, indeed, we can tap into some of the resources that exist out there to help this agenda forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Christiana. Actually, my commitment to working with you is here. Now, I would like to invite Rosanna to respond.
Thank you, Naoko. Thank you for your good comments. As Christiana mentioned, I also noticed that you have made a call to us to maximize complementarity and coherence, to closely cooperate, to scaling up projects, to address all these issues in a cross-cutting manner, to work on integrating programming, increased cooperation and coordination, creation of synergies, and so on. And I would like to mention that we take all this as your call. We take it very seriously. It is in line with the Gef 7, and we intend to follow this will of yours. Regarding the MOU, that unfortunately couldn't be agreed to, whose text couldn't be agreed to during COP1. It's going to be the MOU between the COP of the Minamata Convention and the Gef Secretariat, but unfortunately there were some issues which couldn't be agreed to. However, as you mentioned, guidance was provided to the Gef through one of the decisions adopted by the COP as requested in the relevant article of the Convention. And guidance is wide. It comprises overall strategies, policies, program priorities, eligibility for access to and utilization of financial resources. It contains an indicative list of categories of activities that could receive support from the Gef, and so on. As Canada also mentioned, in both entities, the legal advisors have considered that from a merely legal point of view, there is no need of such an MOU. As regards the convention, there is Article 14 that already provides the guidance and establishes the Gef as one of the elements of the financial mechanism of the convention, and guidance has been also provided by the COP to the Gef. And on the other hand, the instrument for the establishment of the restructured Gef also refers explicitly to it supporting, to the Gef supporting the implementation of the Minamata Convention. However, we recognize that there is a trend. It's customary to sign this kind of MOUs. We are in your hands, in the hands of the parties, regarding your will or your wish to continue with such negotiations. Because there are many other factors, of course, besides the legal one that need to be considered, but we are in your hands, and we will proceed as requested by the parties. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rosanna. Now, actually, we are asking you to actually adopt also the paper. There may be opportunity for you to make some comments. Yes, Jos, I know you are coming.
Well, I announced it, right? And for ease of reference, I will go through the paper paragraph by paragraph. Fine? That was a joke, just in case. Thank you for this. I found it very instructive. I mean, you are already advancing reports to conventions in this paper with your responses to the guidance, although also for those who are not due yet, right? But that's I think it's good. I don't think it was done in the past. No. But but those who there was something to say about, but this is important because then I think that everybody can see what's happening, and you don't have to wait until we have to approve a report to the COP next year or so. So that is I find that good, and I don't have too many more. Points to make. I coincide with what I think Norway said on the desertification part, on the land degradation neutrality fund. There's some indication that Gef has contributed with some technical assistance and so, not to the fund because I'm not allowed to. But we would like to understand that a bit better. We know that, I mean, a real response to the it's not guidance, to the decisions that relate to Gef in UNCCD will come next year when there's the COP. And we also note that there's actually very little related to the Gef directly. There's a lot of calls to the donors and so, but there's very few issues. But I mean, they need to be answered, and we will be in a better position next year when we have more new things that will have happened. When it comes to guidance in general, guidance or indication, because CCD is not guidance, but I forgot now, I'm not going to look up the paragraph, but interesting for the discussion we had yesterday, that in the guidance at least 3 conventions are referring to sustainable development goals, directly in the guidance too, or in the guidance or the invitations to the Gef, and that is POPs, biodiversity, and CCD, yeah, that's the one that's not guidance, right? 15.3, right? SDG 15.3. So it is there, as we have argued yesterday. It's actually, and it won't go away. First, it will just intensify, and I think good so. And I think that's going to be even more the case when we are working on the new strategy in biodiversity, for instance. Having said that. That was my main point. I would just pick up on of course, something that was music to my ears, although it's a bit sad when Canada referred to first the MOU, but that's okay, the MOU Minamata, but of course the situation for the Stockholm Convention that will receive less support on the Gef 7. You've never heard me in the council on this. That's I believe. But I think no, it was only in the replenishment process that I made the point. I'll make it for the council. I find this a reputational issue and a potentially damaging thing for Gef. That after having a POPs allocation status quo 4 years ago, we're now actually diminishing the support. I think it is a very serious thing, and I hope we can reflect on that. I'm not going to change anything anymore, but you can't not see it and not recognize it. And we'll hear next year we will hear plenty of it about it. So I wanted to repeat that in the context of the conventions. We all know that Gef is there because of the conventions. We have worked hard in some cases, and that's particularly Stockholm and Minamata, to have the Gef as the financial mechanism. So we have an obligation to live up to expectations as that countries have for the financial mechanism. And by the way, I don't know if you can ask a question still that on Minamata, the Gef is not the only entity of the financial mechanism. There's the specific international program on capacity building and technical assistance, which is the second component of the financial mechanism. It's a voluntary fund to be located somewhere. I have lost track of where we stand, but it is capacity building and technical assistance. So you really need to coordinate well with the Gef, because that's Gef's business also. It's a long story. The negotiations, I'm not going to get into that. But with that, I think I made all the points, and I mean, with regard to the decision, it's déjà vu, but I can agree with it.
Thank you so much. Now, I'd like to ask to invite Gustavo and the team to respond to any of the questions raised to you.
Well, thank you. The first take-home message is that we hear you on the need for more detail on the LDN fund and how we are engaging with it. And we'll make sure that we have that in the next report in more details. We heard a lot of comments and recommendations about engagement with other climate funds, in particular the Green Climate Fund. And to that effect, I would like to remind everybody and invite everybody to the meeting that we're going to have, a coordination meeting tomorrow. It's an event at 6 o'clock, right? 6:30. 6:30 between the GCF and the Gef. So that's you're going to learn more about ideas on how can we do coordination on the ground, find opportunities for joint programming and so forth. So we are really looking forward to that and invite you to be there. Thank you.
So with that, I'd like you to approve the proposed paper. Thank you so much. So the paper adopted. Now, I understand one more paper you need to introduce. Gustavo, now you are okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. So the next agenda item under this topic is the MOU between the COP of UNCCD and the Council of the Gef. In this agenda, we have before you the MOU, the COP of UNCCD and the Council of the Gef, which you may recall there were draft amendments to the MOU, to the CCD and Council, and we presented them to you in the 51st Council meeting in 2016, so almost 2 years ago. And following the Council decision, Council members submitted to the Gef Secretariat comments on the draft amendments, and we received those by the 31st of January of 2017. These comments that we received were incorporated into a revised version. This revised version was submitted jointly by the Executive Secretary of the UNCCD Secretariat and the CEO of the Gef to the COP 13 of UNCCD in September of 17 for its approval. And COP 13 adopted the new MOU without any further changes to the document. The decision also requested the Secretariat of the UNCCD and invited the Secretariat of the GEF to make appropriate arrangements to sign the MOU on behalf of the Global Environment Facility, in the case of the CEO, and the Secretariat of CCD on behalf of the Conference of the Parties. So in this decision, we invite the Council to approve the MOU and to authorize the Gef CEO to sign the MOU on your behalf, upon which it will enter into force and replace the MOU between the Gef and CCD that dates back to 28th of October of 2005. Thank you.
Thank you, Gustavo. Are there any questions or comments, inquiries? If not, the decision adopted. Thank you so much.
Okay, colleagues, as mentioned before the lunch break, we circulated a couple of documents, and we're going to return now to a couple of items that were opened yesterday, and ideally with a view of closing them. So just to give you the running order for the next period, we'll start with agenda item 11 on terms of reference and membership of the working group on governance. We'll then move to agenda item 8, terms of reference for the private sector advisory group, and then to agenda item 9, the updated guidelines on STAR. With those three hopefully out of the way, we'll then revert to the agenda as published, agenda item 18, small grants programme, and then through to the end of the day. So with that, agenda item 11, terms of reference and membership of the working group on governance. The revised draft was circulated prior to the lunch break. Simplest thing I think is to invite any comments or questions on that from the floor. Okay. I'm assuming everyone has read the paper, so seeing some nods. Thank you, Minunari. Not seeing any head shakes or flags up. Can we take it that the revised terms of reference and membership are agreed? Done. Thank you.
Let's wait and see if he's going to say anything about the membership, because we've already got the membership.
Yeah. Stefan, do you want to say anything at this point about the membership, for instance, or? No? Okay. We can proceed. We can proceed. So agenda item 8 in that case, the terms of reference to the private sector advisory group. Again, the Secretariat works on a revised document which was circulated prior to lunch. Again, I'll look to the floor for any comments or questions on the revised draft. Okay. Oh, Manrique, Argentina, please.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. First of all, we thank you for the revised version of the document of the terms of reference. We believe that it's an improved version. But we still don't see clearly identified the member states. In other words, the council members in particular. We don't see them clearly identified in the document. That's on the one hand, and on the other hand, yesterday one of the speakers talked about, or threw up an idea, if I remember correctly, that it should be an open-ended working group. In other words, that it should not work with the Chatham House rules mentioned in point 10, which would also be preferable. They are the two comments that we can put forward to you now. Thank you.
Thank you, Manrique. Lauren, please.
Yes, hello, thank you. Our constituency would just like to inquire why there were changes that were made to the paragraph number 7 from the version that was sent, the suggested version. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you. There is another one.
Aparna, see your flag.
Thank you. Just to say on the private sector advisory group terms of reference, we are happy that the ambassadorial role has been dropped, and the clear mandate now is to provide inputs and advice for development of the private sector strategy. While the advisory group in para 8 will consult the Gef agencies for recommendations, inputs into its recommendations, will there be any occasion or mechanism for obtaining inputs from the operational focal points, or will that be considered when the advice is put up to the council, at which time the operational focal points can obviously channel their inputs? And last issue is I am not quite clear why the meetings have to be conducted under Chatham House rules, since we have established that there will be no conflict of interest in the selection of the members. Thank you.
Okay, so let's us try to respond about the role of the nation states, which is raised by both Memrike and also the Apana. Two ways of thinking about it. The partly that for nation states, that actually this group will directly actually talk to the council, so that from that point of view, you are actually the direct contact of them. If the question is that if that group has an opportunity to engage with the OFP level, what we are trying to maybe think is that when we do a consultation, the group will do a consultation, maybe that we can actually facilitate that group also to have some kind of mechanism that to get some inputs from the OFP. One of the challenges I actually see is how we could manage it. That because this group, okay, practically speaking, it will be only established after summer. We will be very busy now that finalizing the TOR could be done, that we'll talk to all the potential candidates and strike the balance here and there. I think that practically speaking, maybe we can only institute that group after summer. Then that for the next few months, that how quickly we could move. So it's a bit of the fighting with time. So that is a bit of the constraints that I think we see it, but maybe we try our best to facilitate that work to find a way to the opportunity for OFP to provide kind of input. So that maybe we try to do it. The Chatham House rule is partly because that some of those potential candidates may not necessarily want to be exactly cited by what he or she may say, that it comes from that consideration. But maybe Gustavo, you may have the reason why you come up with that.
Yeah, just to complement Naoko's comment. In our experience engaging, particularly with the ad hoc group from the NGI that you've known about in Gef 6, sometimes they offer very good advice coming from their own experience, actually within their own business, but they don't like to be quoted, sometimes exposing lessons learned that were not necessarily conducive of external communications about what they said. The conflict of interest, I think it's a separate discussion, and I think we addressed that by removing. But in our experience, the Chatham House rules, which is just the attribution of comments to individuals proves to be conducive of more candid input and candid comments than not. So that's the reason. May I address? Yeah. And since I have the microphone, can I address Lauren's comments? Actually, we looked into that original comments that some of you provided, and we felt that it would be perhaps not so practical to get the advisory group to prepare its schedule, and that's why we think that we could facilitate that process, because these people are busy and it's hard to commission anyone to do that. So instead, what we introduced in terms of language is that the advisory group would jointly organize its work to ensure that the topics that they feel are important to discuss would be reflected. We actually circulated that earlier, and I think there was a good consensus, but if not, yeah, we'd like to hear from you.
Thank you, Gustavo. Any other questions at this point, or are we able to adopt this? I think one thing I would just reflect on is, and this I think goes to Manrique's question about the open-ended nature. There wasn't consensus on this question yesterday. There were differing views. I think we agreed that it would be considered within the initial period, and the paragraph as drafted, I think, allows a consideration during the formative period. So the group will operate at least until the strategy is approved, and then the Council can assess at that point the relevance or the advisability of continuing the group in its same form or in an altered form. So the prospect is there, but we will, as a Council, come back to that question once the strategy has been developed by the group, and we can more, with evidence behind us, assess the utility of the group as structured. So it's not ruled out, but it's not stated as being open-ended from the get-go at this point. So, colleagues, any other questions? Failing that, are we able to adopt the revised terms of reference? Thank you. Adopted. Thank you, Gustavo. Thank you, Nako.
So on this one, we need to do the 1, 2.
So you want to correct all 3?
Yeah, this one has to be. Yeah, can you do that?
So this is in that order. Okay, moving forward, the third piece of paper that was circulated before the break had a revised decision text, in fact, for 3 items. Agenda item 6, updated co-financing policy. Agenda item 13, the updated results architecture for Gef 7. And agenda item 9, the updating the system for the STAR, updated STAR. So I'll take those, I think, agenda item 6 first of all, the updated co-financing policy. The revised decisions in front of you. On that one, any comments, questions for the Secretariat from the floor? Seeing none, can we adopt the revised decision? Thank you. Adopted. Next, agenda item 13, so the updated results architecture for Gef 7. Revised document is on the second page of the paper. Once again, any comments or questions from the floor? May, France, please.
Merci. Thank you, first of all. Well, because there's no detail in the amendments made, I just wanted to make sure that what I raised yesterday on sub-indicator 9.3 on the protocol, the Montreal Protocol, and the inclusion of HFCs would be included in the result, because I would like to recall that this is part of the programming directions that we adopted, paragraph 219. Thank you.
Thank you. Jos, please, Belgium.
Yeah, thank you. Well, the same point, really, it was mentioned, and I think it's important, and not only because it's in the programming direction, because things will actually happen. A small group of countries, I agree, but so some indication that we will have that indicator. And with regards to the issue on the SDGs, I mean, your underlined text. This is language for the highlights of the council. This is not decision text, or do I misread that? When you say the council further noted the work done through and so some clarification. Is this going to enter? In what form is this going to enter, and where?
Thank you, Jos. I think before going to Manrique and Nauko, I think can address that point immediately.
I just want to make sure that we were now talking about this agenda item 13, so that then, so with this understanding, I think maybe we need to explain where this text comes from. Agenda item 13, this revised one, yeah, because then the question is then where it comes from.
It's proposed to be the decision, the revised decision.
Yeah, that the question is why you propose it. Actually, just the question is that is this in the highlight or is this a text? That is the question.
Yes.
Right, and maybe you could actually also take that the Manrique's question.
Jos, we'll come back to you on that in a moment. Manrique, maybe if I can go to you at this point, please.
Thank you. I, in fact, had the same question as the previous speakers. We've made this comment previously, and it is our understanding that the Secretariat does everything possible to find a compromise solution for this document. However, we believe, once again, that every time that it's necessary, we should stress the importance of the Sustainable Development Objectives. And they're not only objectives for developing countries, the DSS, but for all the world. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for the understanding that this is the issue we discussed, and we try to find a solution to firmly acknowledge the importance of the SDGs and this mapping work, at the same time try to accommodate or attend that some political constraints and some of the member countries do have. So the solution we were proposing is actually not to have this attachment to, actually that to separate that attachment to from the decision body, but actually keep it as a separate paper, and after the decision is taken here at the Council on this main document, we will issue that paper attachment as an individual paper, but then we will not lose that important work. In fact, it may be actually that actually kept in a very the good way. So that is a kind of solution we try to propose, and so we try to accommodate that both needs to firmly acknowledge, keep that important one that ongoing, and to kept at the same time to not to adopt it as a part of the decision at this council. So from just responding to the just question, and this is actually the proposed text of decision. It's not a highlight.
Okay, thank you, Nauko, for that clarification. No further questions at this point. May, thank you.
Merci, Peter. Je voudrais juste la réponse à la...
Thank you, Peter. I just like an answer to the question that I asked, that was supported also by Jos and Manrique.
Thank you very much, May. Let me clarify. We do have, as Joss recognized, HFCs in the strategy. But as you know, also the Gef only supports countries with economies in transition under the Montreal Protocol, and the Kigali Agreement has still to be ratified by the countries. And once these countries ratify the targets, we can then establish a baseline. The difficulty to have a separate indicator was that because of this limitation at this moment in time, it's hard to set a baseline. However, we will monitor those savings when we look into our core indicator, I think core indicator 9, and we'll monitor HFCs alongside other substances and be able to report. As countries start to be part of the ratifying the Kigali Agreement, then they will have necessarily to establish baselines. And then we can start to develop perhaps a sub-indicator. But at this stage, it's difficult to do it separately because of this.
Okay. Thank you.
Très rapidement, merci pour ne pas prolonger ça éternellement. L'idée.
Thank you. Not to follow. The idea was not created as a new indicator, but also to include the HFCs. But as there's going to be specific reporting on this, no problem.
May. With that and no further flags up, can I take it that we can approve this decision? Thank you. So finally, of the three texts, agenda item 9, updating the star. I think before going to the floor, perhaps would help to ask Naoko to explain the changes and clarify how this has been reflected from the discussion yesterday. Naoko.
Thank you, Peter. This is to actually to follow up the discussion we had on the flexibility issue. That then after you know that we proposed this and the policy, a proposal of how to achieve the 30% or to keep the 30%. That the resources subject to the flexibility up to 30%, then that and to keep the 7 million, and then that introduce that the 15% the flexibility, marginal flexibility. We realized that it actually inadvertently harm at quite a number of countries. So that based on the yesterday's discussion and several suggestions, what we are trying to propose, we are proposing here is actually quite the suggestion made by our Moroccan friend, the Rashid proposal, which is basically to get this 2 million buffer back to the table, and so that nobody really lose that flexibility or existing flexibility, but to try to keep this 30% threshold, so that the original proposal was to put the 50% flexibility, marginal flexibility at 50%. We will reduce that 15% to the 13%, so that we can still keep and honor that decision that which is to that the resources subject to the flexibility should be less than 30%. But then with that, nobody really lose that any of the flexibility which they are now enjoying it. So this is our proposal, and I hope that then this will actually meet kind of everybody's demand or request. So that is the Secretariat new proposal now.
Thank you, Naoko. Colleagues, over to you. May, followed by Joss from Belgium, please.
Merci.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you to the Secretariat for having worked on the compromise proposal made by Morocco yesterday. I can't help regretting two things, nonetheless. On the one hand, the fact that in this system, which, well, thankfully, no country will be penalized, but there's still about 50 countries that won't gain in flexibility, as opposed with Gef 6. And I still regret I didn't get any answer to my question as to the reasons for this change in methodology. However, in a spirit of compromise, and if this solution is acceptable to all, we are prepared to accept it.
Thank you, May. Jos, Belgium, please.
Well, thanks for all the hard work, but you know, there was the original demand was full flexibility for everyone all the time, and I mean, I was one who would oppose that, and still. But and so we say improve flexibility. If you say that, and I would also like to hear the answer why you changed from a fixed amount to a percentage, because this has been asked now 12 times. But if you try to design a system for an equitable system of flexibility, you would expect that if at one extreme you have full flexibility, you have another extreme. We will see what happens, but there's a middle part that would have somewhere flexibility between full and none. You would design a system that those who need it more from a resource point of view would have more flexibility. In the proposal before us, what you have full flexibility. You have increased flexibility for the other end, but the middle part gets stuck at the same level, right? They don't lose because you reviewed it. They were going to lose out on it, but now they don't. But still, I don't find the system logical. Well, my opinion, if you try to help, and helping means full flexibility for the most needed, the next time should have increased flexibility, and the third tier will have also some flexibility, but maybe not that much. And I'm looking at my charming colleague in front of me. So of course we understand you, but I mean, just trying to see, are we actually doing the best thing? Having said that, I hope you understand me. I was able to explain myself. That is my main point. But if everybody agrees, I'm not going to stand in the way of anyone, of course. But I mean, I think that we're trying to be as correct and as equitable to everyone, and sometimes we fail, and this is a case.
Thank you, Jos. Manrique, followed by Aparna, please.
Gracias.
Thank you. With regards to the amendment in the percentages, 15% of flexibility would have been better, but we can live with 13%. That's not a problem. The text which is underlined in the revised decision, the amended decision, we believe is an improvement. But what is still worrying us is this classification, which I understand comes from the World Bank or another agency that does not belong to the United Nations family. Upper middle income countries, high income countries, etc. We could have different income levels, or as many definitions as income levels in the world. But the other problem is that there are countries that can have a high income level when the cycle starts now in the year 1st of July 2018, when the replenishment cycle starts, and then have another income level, a different income level, for example, less, because the population has increased. There's been a population increase with regards to the GDP, when we're talking about GDP per capita. In other words, this is an indicator that is not representative of the reality of many countries. We are talking on behalf of my Southern Cone group, and in other occasions of the replenishment cycles, other countries in this group have referred to this problem, but it's something that does not affect only our region, but it's a general comment. So there are two different aspects about this topic. First of all, if it's not UN-agreed terminology, number one, and the GEF is providing services to UN conventions. The second point is that it does not reflect the reality on the ground. Yesterday I gave a few examples, but perhaps I was not creative enough with my examples to try to explain why it does not reflect the reality on the ground. I can't think of any more examples, to be quite honest. And that is all on this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manrique. Aparna, followed by Jeffrey, please.
First of all, thank you to the Gef Secretariat and to colleagues around the table for having worked on this in response to the concerns expressed by some of the colleagues around the table. I would like to, first of all, I think, congratulate Joseph of Belgium on his the very analytical point that he has brought out. And I would like to add that this is inevitable because we are moving from a flat amount rate to a proportionate rate. So whether it is 2 million or 3 million or 1 million, there will always be, I mean, whether we use 5%, 10% or 15%, there is always going to be a set of countries which will be worse off than they were unless we provide the protection of a minimum floor. So I think it is a direct consequence of moving from a flat 2 million flexibility to all countries towards a percentage-based flexibility. So that is the first point I would make, and therefore this is possibly not the ideal decision or a very perfect decision, but we are trying to, I think, hammer out a compromise whereby nobody will be worse off, at least in terms of flexibility. There will continue to be countries who will be worse off in terms of their access to resources, as I pointed out yesterday, for other reasons. But we are not trying to address that problem. I think that is a problem that has been digested. In respect of flexibility, as I understand it, the basic reason to provide flexibility is related to the overarching objective of Gef, which is to maximize global environment benefits, if I am not wrong. And for that purpose, we are providing flexibility. And therefore, the argument possibly is that the smaller the allocation for a country, the more flexibility they require so that that small amount is not fragmented into minuscule projects which will not maximize the environmental benefits. That is the understanding for having flexibility. And therefore, in the spirit of that understanding, it makes sense, having dealt with those who are having an allocation of less than 7 million, providing them full flexibility. For the second category of countries, we are now trying to address two things. One, that nobody should have less flexibility than they enjoyed in Gef 6, and second, to increase overall the environmental benefits arising by providing more flexibility. So that is what we have tried to do, I think, in NAOCO's proposal as was presented by her. And in the interest of maximizing or moving towards increasing the environmental benefits by providing flexibility, we are extremely happy to reduce the proposal of proportion of flexibility from 15 to 13. We can certainly live with this because in any case, as has again been pointed out by Joseph, it is higher than the 2 million that was enjoyed by this third category of recipient countries. And we will therefore have to arrive at a kind of a compromise which we are very happy to support, because we do not want any group of countries to have reduced flexibility compared to what they enjoyed. So we have had consultations within our constituency too. And of course there are countries within our constituency which fall in all three categories. So therefore we feel that is reflective of the entire body of recipients here, that it may be not the perfect solution, but it is a solution that will leave no one worse off. And therefore we are happy and grateful for the Gef Secretariat to have considered how this could have been done, and quite happy to go for a reduced rate. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aparna. Very clear and well received. Jeffrey, please.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you to the Secretariat and for some of our colleagues that consulted and worked overnight to get to where this is. Like Jaws, I don't pretend to fully understand the method that led us to here, other than I think like Aparna mentioned, the key issue here, right, is that there is a logic to smaller countries receive smaller allocations. They have their marginal benefit from flexibility is necessarily higher than larger countries with larger contributions. That's irrespective of income, by the way. I think that's simply a matter of, if you receive less resources from the Gef, being able to program a bigger project and being able to attract the right agency to do that does scale with the size, and so flexibility allows you to do that better, and when your allocation is particularly small. So I think, and it's with that logic, I think, that we arrived with this compromise, right? And I think it's not necessarily perfect. It's not perfect because the 30% cap that we were supportive of and that was endorsed yesterday morning sort of sets this up to be a zero-sum game decision at this point, to be very frank. So I think this is a lesson learned for the future about where flexibility is needed, who benefits most from flexibility, and how we should think about this down the road. But for the moment, I think we are happy to accept this compromise. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey. While there have been a couple of small question marks, I think the conversation across the last 5 or 6 exchanges, to my ear, has kind of answered those. I'm inclined, therefore, to seize on the word compromise, which I've heard at least 3 times, and I suspect more, and actually suggest that we have reached a point where we can accept this revised decision and move on to the next item. I'm prepared to be challenged on that, but that's my read of the room. Seeing no objection, thank you all. Thank you for the compromise shown, and that is taken as a decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So let us move on to the next item of today, which is a small grants program, and I think I'm chairing. Okay, so now I would like to ask that my team, Francois, to present this very important program to you for your consideration. Francois.
Thank you, Chair. So on behalf of the Secretariat, I'm pleased to introduce the Council paper titled Gef Small Grant Program Implementation Arrangements for Gef 7. This paper presents an update relative to the Gef Small Grant Program, the SGP, including its strategic and operational directions under Gef 7. And it also identifies key proposed implementation arrangements for the overall operation of the program. In addition, the paper lays out the eligibility criteria for country programs to access core funds and proposes rules to govern the country's use of their star allocation for purpose of SGP. The recommended Council decision covers two main points and reads as follows. The Council, having reviewed document Gef Small Grant Program Implementation Arrangements for Gef 7, takes note of the implementation arrangements and approves the proposed financing structure for the Gef 7 Small Grant Programs. The Council requests UNDP, in consultation with the Secretariat, to prepare a paper describing the approach and the criteria for the allocation of core funds to countries for Council information at its 55th meeting in the fall of 2018. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Françoise. Now our floor is open for your comments, questions. Okay. Marike, please.
Gracias.
Thank you very much, Naoko. I am representing here the three groups of the countries in Latin America. I would like to say that the Small Grants Program is a development program. It's a very important program for us. It includes implementation of environmental criteria. It is a means that we use to increase economic, social, and financial inclusion in our societies. Furthermore, it offers a great opportunity for scaling up. In this sense, it is important to keep financing or funding this small grants program at the global level. Furthermore, regarding the ceiling imposed on the star resources that could be used for the small grants program, we believe that the same rules of GEF 6 should still apply. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now I want to call about Ratchiner, followed by Jane.
Thank you, Chair. Our constituency also recognizes the importance of SGP to tackle grassroots problems. We noted that under Gef 6, the delivery mechanism was possible. That is, countries were able to allocate a component under the full-size project proposal to implementation by SGP. In the document, it is not clear whether under Gef 7 the delivery mechanism will still be possible. And if yes, I would like to raise a point of concern regarding administrative fees. Last time our country was not able to use the delivery mechanism because it involved double administrative fees, one at the agency level, which was implementing the full-size project, And then the second, at the level of SGP, which was requesting us to pay another administrative fee if it has to engage in delivery mechanism to pay UNOPS fees. So with this double agency fee, it wasn't really logical to use the SGP delivery mechanism. It was better that we go directly to implement the project. That's my question and concern. Thanks.
Thank you. Now may I call on Jane, followed by Lauren.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, and thank you to the Secretariat for the paper. Some members of my constituency have some problems with the proposed cap of 2 million, as this will not be sufficient to cover enough ground to produce the global environmental benefits through community initiatives. It is our opinion that the amount for SGP should be raised or at least maintained at its Gef 6 level. More aptly, since the star allocation rests with the country, we respectfully submit that the allocation for SGP be left to the country itself. We therefore call on the Secretariat to consider the removal of the proposed cap as contained in paragraph 70 of the paper and allow countries full discretion and flexibility to program STAR into their small grants program. Thank you.
Thank you. Now Lauren, followed by Camila.
Thank you, and our constituency would like to thank the Secretariat for this document. And we believe that the SDG program is an important program yielding very interesting results. We have, however, 3 inquiries we would like to make. One is regarding sustainability. We've discussed a lot the issues of sustainability for the Gef program, and we actually discussed it this morning as well. But we would like to know how the sustainability aspects are for the SDG projects, if this is something that the EIO has maybe looked at. To what degree is sustainability a challenge also for the SGP projects? Our second question is in relation to the Equator Initiative, which is an initiative under UNDP, which Norway also supports, which seems to have a similar focus to the SGP, supporting local and indigenous initiatives promoting sustainable development. Could you please let us know what are the links between these 2 programs? And finally, we would like to get some clarity on the reporting arrangements for the SGP. When the reporting is done for the Gef program, does it also include results from the SGP? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now Camila, followed by CSO representative.
Thank you, Nako. El programa de pequeñas donaciones.
Thank you, Nako. The small grants program has been indeed very successful, as it has allowed us to replicate the experiences with outcomes that go beyond the expectations. And we are very concerned that the resources have been reduced for this program. And given the new ceilings for Gef 7 in countries such as mine, with the reduction from $5 million to $2 million, I think that there is a level of incoherence by limiting the access to the funds, when indeed the idea is to broaden the geographical coverage across all sectors as well. And so in that regard, we would like to request the Secretariat for the criteria to be elaborated and presented at the next Council meeting, bearing in mind all the benefits that are available to all these countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now let's hear CSO representative.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We sincerely celebrate the recognition that the SGP remains one of the Gef's most salient initiatives, being able to concretize the protection of nature while generating sustainable livelihoods, contributing to the overall mission of the Gef to safeguard the global environment. We fully agree with the focus on promoting and supporting innovative and scalable initiatives, Indeed, the SGP is the incubator of many projects that have only started small, but grown into larger, more long-term interventions. Further, the Gef already has experience successfully facilitating initiatives that match the new Gef strategic lines of intervention. Having said that, we look with great concern at the limitation of fund allocations for the SGP. Indeed, in order to continue and improve its highly valuable and recognized action, it is crucial to increase fund allocations for the SGP, reducing the restrictions for access to STAR funds. In this regard, we highly recommend that the countries may use up to 15% of their STAR allocations for the SGP, eliminating all the other limits. Furthermore, we highly recommend that the Gef uses the CSO Indigenous People and Local Community platform created around the SGP, as well as the Gef CSO network, as innovative mechanisms for medium-sized and full-sized projects execution, where the SGP guarantees the necessary follow-up and respect of the Gef standards, while increasing cost efficiency and cost effectiveness and contributing to a real CSO, indigenous people and local community engagement in Gef action. In this regard, through the SGP and the Gef CSO network, the Gef may start a process of capacity building to increase CSO, indigenous people and local community capacities to apply for and execute medium-sized and full-sized projects, and to guarantee a continued ongoing technical, administrative and organizational assistance during the execution of the project. Finally, we highly recommend that regarding participation of private sector interest, the Gef deeply analyzes successful experience of SGP and Gef CSO network partnership and make best practices visible and formalized. This will ensure the replication and upscaling of these actions and can increase private investor confidence, while assuring environmental and social safeguards, especially from exploitation and manipulation of local communities. Thank you.
Thank you. May I call on Kulekani, followed by Laura.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. On behalf of my constituency, we do appreciate the retaining of the SGP. This is an important and essential framework for the Gef flagship projects for the grassroots stakeholders in our constituency, that is Southern Africa. We would like to appreciate we would appreciate it more if more resources were to be provided to the program. Like other colleagues have echoed this message that maybe countries should be left to use their STAR allocation to replenish the SGP. However, we do have we do note that within our region, Southern Africa, there are some member states which are not yet benefiting from this program. Namely, this is Angola and the Kingdom of Eswatini, formerly Swaziland. And we would appreciate if they could be considered for benefiting from this program. And as I speak now, I think their letters of interest have already been submitted to the relevant authorities for consideration. Therefore, we feel this program will enhance a meaningful and regional participation of our grassroots in the countries or the regional environmental agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Now I want to call Laura, followed by Rashid.
Gracias.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our constituency, particularly Brazil and Colombia, would like to support what was mentioned by Argentina, Mexico, and other delegations that preceded me, and would like to request kindly to the Secretariat a further clarification on this ceiling, because it is a limit that is being placed on the countries on the use of resources, and to decrease the ceiling to $2 million, as has been mentioned before. This measure, in short, will limit the freedom to use the star resources and will generate or present a contradiction, since we'll be talking about the flexibility that the star should provide for. So we don't really fully comprehend how this measure would be creating limitations on the use of resources by each of the countries. As we know, and as has been mentioned before, the small grants program funds a number of smaller projects of benefit to many communities, which are indeed very important to be able to achieve these global benefits, including environmental benefits. This is a strategy that we need to work together with grassroots communities, and it would place us a great level of difficulty, as it would imply additional pressures with the societies and communities that we work with, as we've been decreasing the resources available to them. And this goes against the achievements and successful lessons that we have learned so far. Therefore, we believe that the small grants program should have a greater level of resources and should continue with the rules established for Gef 6. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to call on Rashid, followed by Marita.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, my constituency thanks the Secretariat for this document. We consider the SGP program to be very important. It has enabled the achievement of very encouraging results that are often innovative, even with very small funding. But in very remote or vulnerable areas, we see truly encouraging results. For this reason, we ask that a greater effort of communication and marketing be produced around the successful projects for them to be scaled up locally or globally. A second recommendation, in as much as possible, these microfinance or small grants projects be associated with other Gef projects of a medium or larger scale to produce even greater impacts, territorially speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Rashid. May I call on Marita, followed by Apana.
Thank you, Chair. We support the proposal and welcome the program's more strategic focus on innovation and initiatives with the potential for being scaled up. We believe that the SGP can play an important role for small incubators, which was also said earlier, and can in successful projects contribute to their successful scaling up of innovative ideas. We also think that the SGP plays an important role supporting institutional and technical capacity building at local level. We would, however, like to see more focus on gender equality in the activities of the SGP. Thank you.
Thank you, Marita. May I call on Apana, followed by Mahel.
Thank you, Chair. We support the continued role of SGP in providing a platform for local communities and CSOs to work on innovative and scalable or replicable projects that can weave into the Gef projects in focal areas and impact programs. This chair has always emphasized the importance of associating and empowering local communities so as to ensure the sustainability of the environment benefits, as well as to integrate adaptation and mitigation strategies into developmental approach at the grassroots level. As SGP turns 25 years old, we would like to focus on the complementarity of SGP to the Gef projects and the role of SGP in hastening or improving the achievement of global environmental benefits. Scalability of SGP initiatives is an important aspect of this, and therefore we need to reflect on the mechanisms available for ensuring that scalability is enabled and is measured. It would be useful to examine the potential for large projects and government programs also to best benefit from the experience arising from innovative initiatives. For example, are the steering committees mandated to look at this aspect in selection of projects for SGP financing? Hence, we would recommend more meaningful consultation by UNDP with the operational focal points in the steering committee. Second, we concur with the proposal for reviewing the criteria for eligibility to core funds. And more pertinently, we also concur with the proposal that UNDP, in consultation with the Secretariat, elaborate further the criteria for allocation of core funds. Thirdly, we would like to understand the underlying reasons for restricting the use of star allocation in upgraded countries to 2 million. And finally, we believe that we can if not scale up the program, increase the impact of the program even with the financing that is made available in Gef 7. Thank you.
Thank you so much. May I call on Mahel, followed by Abdul.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, the suggested decision is affecting a number of our constituency countries, and they asked me to submit our objection on it, if it's allowed. We do believe, our countries in our constituency, that the SGP remains one of the most successful initiative or project globally for the Global Environment Facility. The SGP is not only playing a major role in safeguarding the global environment, it is also touching the local indigenous people of the countries, and which makes it, the impact of it larger and larger. Those small projects are making a big difference among the indigenous people. So on these bases, we highly recommend to stick with the GEF6 guidelines and eligibility criteria. Otherwise, we would highly appreciate if the eligibility criteria could be revised. Also, the 10% for the upgraded of using the star allocation is not clear, and why do still restricting the upgraded countries of using their star allocations. I think it's up to the country to decide whether that SGP program is making a big difference or making the objectives or the national priorities that they have identified, so let them do it without any restrictions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Sorry, I just want to call on you, followed by Fitzroy. Go ahead.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Our constituency also want to take this opportunity to thank the Secretariat for presenting this paper. And we also want to join previous speakers, especially in raising the concern on the flexibility of the star allocation. We observe that the issue of the 10% is a challenge, in as much as there has been reduction in the amount of resources that will be allocated to countries, and we think it will be better if that is being reviewed from 10 to 15%, and also the removal of the cap of 2 million is also another challenge. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I want to call on Fitzroy.
Okay. The Caribbean constituency support the program and sees the Small Grants program as a key to community empowerment, innovation, learning, and knowledge management. The SGP has assisted many of our economies to provide direct transformational changes within our small communities, especially the most vulnerable rural ones. Moreover, the SGP continues to help build the capacity of our civil society organizations, who are now able to access funding to help build their communities in a sustainable manner. We are also encouraged that the Gef, under its 7th replenishment, continues to allow countries to divert portions of their star allocation to the SGP. Thank you.
May I call on, is it Jos, Belgium Jos?
Yes, because UK Jos is very silent these days. Thank you. There is no doubt that the SGP is one of the, I think it was once called flagships of the Gef, and we have to make sure that it continues to be, and it's very positive to hear all the comments around from the recipient countries. I mean, they confirm, reconfirm, reconfirm that it is important not only for global environmental benefits, but for capacity building and so on and so forth. And unfortunately, the program has also suffered from a cut in the of the core, and yeah, it is unfortunate. So, but that's what it is. We're not going to rediscuss that again. But at the same time, I hear interested colleagues here reflecting on this reduction from 5 to 2 million, and until my Indian colleague spoke, nobody was asking why that happened. So I'm just repeating that question: why all of such a big cut? Would like to understand.
May I call on Stefan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We welcome, first of all, we thank for the Secretariat and the management of the Small Grants Program for the document. The Small Grants Program is an essential program also in our constituency, and we are pleased to see its continuation in Gef 7, albeit with a slightly reduced envelope. We welcome the adjustment to the program, and in particular the implementation arrangements, which address many of the issues raised by the Independent Evaluation Office. We're looking forward to the document describing the detailed approach and the criteria for the retained allocation of the core funds, and also how sustainability would be measured. We broadly agree with the chosen Gef 7 strategic initiatives and welcome their alignment with the overall Gef 7 strategy. At the same, we would like to highlight that it is key that the Small Grants Program continues to keep its strong local community perspective and remains responsive to the demands from the ground. At the end, allow us a short remark on those who criticized the cuts. Whenever you broaden the range of those that are eligible without increasing the envelope, the pieces get smaller. So it's a matter of balancing, making more countries benefit from a program versus having the same amounts in the envelope. Finally, a question: will the Small Grant Program report along the same results architecture as the rest of the Gef portfolio, or are you planning to capture any additional impact indicators, in particular social impact indicators? Thank you.
Thanks much, Stefan. I think we hear from everybody on the table, so I'd like to ask that Francoise to respond to your questions.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, first, let me say it's heartening to hear the converging feedback on the Small Grant Program and the fact that the countries in particular appreciate the value of this program and in fact, are valuing, I would say, the same aspects as the ones that have been lifted up in the IOA evaluation of 2016, which is the fact that they bring innovation, they tend to position at a frontier, they exhibit scale-up potential, and they allow the capture through knowledge and learning of this potential of replication, which has been pointed out by both Morocco and India, and that's highly valuable. To the question of Norway on that point, the IO evaluation of 2016 was also positive on sustainability and on gender focus, and that's additionally heartening. So, it's the 25th anniversary of the SGP program, and I think it is a very good news that we have consensus on the value of the program, and that's the first point here that is worth highlighting. Now, in the logic of what's being proposed, there's first the background of reduced resources, which when, proportionate rules were applied across financial scenarios in the replenishment context, have brought down the core funding to a smaller amount from 140 million to 128 million. So that's a mechanical impact of having less resources, and that's a first element here. Now, on the issue of access to the program, I think a number of speakers have pointed out, starting with Botswana, in fact, that there has been countries expecting to join the SGP program which have not been able to do so, and it is an important change that is highlighted in the paper that all these countries should be moving forward eligible for core funding. And as Stefan pointed, more countries and less funding means smaller allocations and an inherent challenge on internal allocation, which is why it would be expected that at the next council, a discussion led by UNDP on this would be worthwhile for the council to engage into, to make sure that we have communality of views on the criteria that should be applied to that. So that's a second point. But it is an important point that whereas some countries have, that's the graduated countries, been in the program for more than 15 years, or have received an amount, and have received an amount above 6 million in aggregate, some countries have tried to join the SGP program and have not been able to do that to date. So that's one major change, right? On the issue of use of star allocation for the SGP program, which is the object of a lot of comments, I mean, it's obviously one that we need to discuss, but let me mention the underlying logic here. First, there has always been a limit to the star allocation, to the capacity of countries to mobilize star allocation into the SGP. This is not new with the current proposal. The limits that we're proposing to change, but they always existed. And the reason why there's limit, the underlying logic of the limits is that obviously the replenishment process exercises a lot of trade-offs and carries a lot of conversation on the different financial aggregates of the different program elements, and it is leading, the business rollout once this is done. And so the context of that decision is to avoid important swings in funding, which have occasionally happened. It happened in Gef 5, for instance, which is why rules were tightened between 5 and 6. Now, as it comes, if you look at how funding has been used to top off SGP allocations in Gef 6, the averages are as follows. For graduated countries which had up to $5 million of flexibility, you could call it, in the use of STAR funding there, the average has been $2.7 million. And therefore, the ceiling has been not necessarily used, right? For countries that are not graduated and which had a lower ceiling of $2 million, the average top-off throughout Gef 6 has been $700,000. So the proposed ceilings were mindful of that, mindful of the overall decrease of resources, and mindful of the need to be able to plan as much as possible the different elements of the program, and that is the logic which is behind the numbers that we have proposed. Now, these numbers can be discussed, and I guess the feedback is also quite clear. So thank you very much. There were a couple of questions which I actually missed. One was relative to the result framework. No, currently the SGP is not reporting within the existing result framework of other Gef products. So when we share with you results and targets and scorecards, the SGP results are not included, but the SGP program reports separately on its own result framework and produces on an annual basis a monitoring report, which is available on their website, where some of these aggregates are being shared. The proposal, as you might have read in the document, is to evolve a new result framework, and we would seek as much alignment as feasible with the one that we are in the process of implementing in Gef 7, but this is work to come in Gef 7 for the SGP. Thank you.
Would you like to, sorry?
May I go on? The Apana, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask whether you would like to comment on making scalability a criteria for selection, potential for scalability, and also more meaningful interaction with the OFPs of Gef. Because the kind of feedback we are getting in our constituency is that SGP has more or less got a life of its own now, so the integration with Gef has to be emphasized. Thank you.
May I call on Lachina, please? Lachina?
My question on the delivery mechanism hasn't been answered. Yeah.
Yes, sure.
Thank you. On the delivery mechanism, yeah, there are some experiences from some full-size projects, particularly international waters, that have used the Small Grants Program as a mechanism to channel funding for communities as well. Even though it has not been mentioned specifically in the paper, in Gef 7, if the conditions are met, and if it's opportunity, it will continue happening. But it's not explicitly mentioned in the paper.
Yeah,
the double administrative charges. Can you also look up on it? If you don't have the answer now, it's okay, but at least when we come to the eligibility criteria, then we can look at it differently.
So we can take it offline.
Can we take that offline? We can discuss that offline, yes?
Well, maybe what we need to understand is, okay.
Okay.
No, actually,
may I explain it again?
Yeah, yes,
I will take the example that we had a full-size project proposal being implemented by UNDP, And in it we wanted to have a component on where the SGP will come in, because they have more experience on the ground root level to do community work regarding mangroves rehabilitation, and they are very good at community level. And we wanted to a component in the full-size project for the SGP as a delivery mechanism stated. But when we requested the SGP Small Grants Program to implement this part, they said no, they will need over and above the UNDP fees, they need a fee of 16% to pay UNOPS, because their funding transits through UNOPS. So 10% UNDP plus 16% per annum to UNOPS, that was becoming a crazy figure.
Can we...
So I was wondering how the other delivery mechanisms have worked, whether such expensive fees have been charged, and if not, so it has to be cleared, so that if this mechanism exists, we want to take advantage of it, but how can we use it without such exorbitant fees?
Just briefly, thank you. This is an issue that UNOPS is trying to charge you for the services that you want them to provide. It's not our rule to require that. It's a management cost issue, and it's at your discretion at the end of the day. But if you want to talk to offline, we can look at this particular case, and then we can see whether there is anything that we can do on our end.
No, it's not in this particular case, because we're not using the delivery mechanism. I'm saying in future, if this delivery mechanism is being implemented, the same issue will recrop. Or maybe other countries are using the delivery mechanism and paying these double charges. Right. This is what I understood, which I find illogical. That's what I'm saying. If this should be a policy decision. If there is a delivery mechanism, then it should also be implementable. If a policy decision is taken at council level to use the delivery mechanism, at ground level, it should be implementable, it should be practical. That's my point. It's not a particular issue, it should be a general one, because countries are using it, and I think council members here are not aware that there is this high administrative cost when they are approving this delivery mechanism.
Okay, let me call on now the Mahil.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick intervention here. As we've been hearing a number of cases of having very high charges by the implementing agencies, so I would rather advise and recommend the Secretariat to try to create a cap for a general cap for all the projects for charging the implementing agencies, instead of charging, putting caps on percentages of using the country's star allocations. I mean, that's better in a way of being freedom. Thank you.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, I think that we have heard a lot about difficulties you may be facing that if we introduce that rule as it is. And I think that we try to also explain why we were proposing this kind of restrictions, partly because that the resources are kind of shrinking, and then when we look at how much was really used, it's more like that is the level actually we have seen. So that was the proposal, but then after hearing those kind of comments and the difficulties, then one proposal would be that then we could remove this 10% that cap, so that then it's going to be flat and 2 million. That may be one solution that you could feel much more that flexibility of the room for maneuver. So that would be maybe that proposal I would like to table. Yeah. Okay, that proposal seems to address many of the concerns, so that if may I take it as an approval, we would like to move on.
Repeat.
The proposal is that to remove that ceiling of actually 10% out and only keep that 2 million threshold as proposed. Laura?
Gracias, señora Presidenta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So therefore, if we understand you correctly, it would be to remove the ceiling of 10% and without exceeding the 2 million. Would that be the case? The rest would apply still the same as per the rules applicable at GF6. So each country will have the resources available to them. So we'll be removed 10% and maintain the $2 million. Is that correct?
Not really. Let us explain.
No, what's being proposed is to remove the percentage cap and keep the absolute cap, which actually means for some of the countries, and particularly the smaller ones, a greater level of flexibility, effectively, right?
So that then is this proposal clear to you? And okay, just please.
I sense confusion, and I wonder if this would benefit from description on a piece of paper and circulation. Otherwise, we're going to be here a long time. I think I'm following, but I'm not sure.
Okay, that's a good suggestion. We will do it. Okay, thank you. Okay, so that we will do it, and so at least that we should be clear about what we have agreed, and it's very important, so that we don't leave any kind of unintended legacy in the going forward. So we will do it. We will come back to you. Could we now? I hope that other questions are kind of answered. Maybe one conversation needs to take on, but then so we would like to actually leave this and the agenda item, and would like to move on to the next one. The next one is another important one. This is the CSP, a country support program implementation arrangements. So I'd like to ask Francois to introduce the paper.
Thank you, Chair. The paper before the Council on the country support program describes the different components and the activities to take place under each one of them. It's actually a very simple paper with minimum changes compared to what has been approved in the past. The draft decision purpose is mostly to allocate the amounts that will be used for each activity from the total budget already decided as part of the replenishment package, and the decision proposed gives the details of how this budget would be broken down across the types of products proposed by the country support program. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So now I'd like to open the floor for your comments and questions. Jos, please.
This one I'm sure I haven't got the right end of the stick on, or haven't captured the logic on. We agreed last time we talked about MPFEs and in relation to the policy recommendations that a key element of helping countries get their programming more effective in light of the IPs and the cross-focal area programming combined exceeding 50% of programming in all likelihood, would mean that more systematic attention would need to go into thinking about how all that was put together at the beginning of the replenishment cycle. We also noted that uptake of NPFEs was patchy at best, and that some countries were not taking up their full allocation. So the rationale for certainly the national dialogue element of this decision is clear to me. What's not clear is why the only 1.7 million for 10 country meetings per annum, which would mean 10 in the first year of 130 or so, at what, 10 or 15% of this budget, is the right distribution of the resources. Whereas, so in other words, we would spend 1.7 in year one when it really counted with only 10 countries, and then the remaining 19.5 for other activities later on. I don't recall how the OPS treated these other activities, and I can see that there are a lot of people attending these meetings and all the rest of it, but and that may be good from the point of view of understanding Gef and this, that and the other thing, all of which has its collateral advantages, but not really germane to this question of getting the programming right. So with that in mind, I'm minded to say that we should increase the component for national dialogues, if those are MPFEs by another name, assuming agencies could support this increase in volume, or to merge those and the other headings so that countries could choose which they wanted to do and how they wanted to distribute this resource in the flexibility sense that we've been discussing earlier on today. And I'm afraid I'm not well enough prepared to have referred to the GCF readiness program, but we've been asking these sorts of questions there too, about how best to enable preparation in a more programmatic way, in that case in relation to NDCs and possibly NAPAs and other such things, but in this case we've got MB SAPs and all sorts of other items. So the thrust of my question is the right amount of resource directed at the right activity soon enough in the cycle to really make an impact on the programming point? And if not, let's make an adjustment, and I'd be quite prepared to adjust away from the workshops and those other things, which I think are less important than the replenishment period preparation activities.
Thank you so much. May I call on Belgium Jos, followed by Malete.
Yeah, for once that UK just speaks, he takes the words out of my mouth. It was exactly my question. And one additional thing, I hate to lose the NPFE acronym. Well, not the acronym, but, because it's very clear. It's self-explanatory, right? national portfolio formulation exercise. Of course, at the beginning of a replenishment period, and that was how it was conceived, and I don't know what the exact percentage has been of utilization. I think it's a bit low, looking at the potential. And as Josh said, if you go to more integration and so on, combination of things and activities and MEA objectives and what have you, it's going to be important to maintain and to assign the right amount of resources at the right time. And if we could maintain the name, I would prefer that, because you can say an aspect of a country dialogue. Yeah, of course, can be an aspect of a workshop or of a soccer game or during. I mean, but the essence is, of course, can we actually help countries, those who want it, because we do adhere to the fact that it's a voluntary thing, not a prerequisite of anything. And also try to incentivize them, because I think it's going to be interesting and more needed if we move to more integration. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Now, may I call on Mallet, followed by Rashina.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, colleagues. I've come a bit late, but I'm very happy to be here in Vietnam, and thanking the host, as well as the Secretariat and all colleagues here around the table. Our seat, of course, also appreciate highly the country support program and what it tries to achieve. Like Josh, I think, mentioned, we are also keen to know a little bit more about the successfulness of the program, and we don't think it was covered actually in the overall Gef 6 evaluation. In fact, we think maybe it's something that's going to be evaluated quite soon, so it would also be quite important to really understand what is the successfulness of the various streams and types of capacity building and country support activities that are part of this program. Are we really using the right vehicles to get the right things going that we want to get going? And I think that's something that perhaps you could just highlight and let us know whether such an evaluation is underway, or at least a review of some sort. And that could inform a prioritization and a design of the program. Like Josh as well, we and I have spent some time on understanding the readiness in GCF. So there's some real opportunities to work on complementarity and coherence. Even the weather agrees, and it's just would be nice, since the document is not highlighting that, to know a little bit more. Are you working together on developing country programs in the context of GCF, and in this context, planning for the implementation of the replenishment funding and the STAR allocation, as well as the integrated programs? How is that done practically? How are you coming together? And then finally, and not a surprise from this seat, we are keen to see all stakeholders, also private sector, involved in activities, especially when we look at now a high ambition on mobilization of resources and co-finance. It is key to have private sector involved very early. And again, this is the paper is kind of silent about how private sector is supposed to be involved. We have heard that in some cases private sector is participating in activities, in regional workshops, etc., but it is not consistent. Could we do something more about mainstreaming private sector throughout the activities of Gef, which is really what we try to do, including elaborating on the aspect and one of the legs of the private sector strategy, which is enabling environment and getting that part going as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and welcome. May I call on Rashina, followed by Rashid.
Thank you, Chair. We've been hearing the donor's point of view. Maybe we can have the recipient point of view. I agree that with Jos that we need to have more national dialogues. But in the document here, it's the last time when we did the national dialogue, that NPFE exercise, we were required to produce a NPFE document, which was rather elaborate for some countries. A lot of consultations were done, elaborate document produced, and then we went to project preparation phase. Two issues crop up with this, because the national dialogue, as you see, is just 10 per year, and then we had to wait for our national dialogue being held, prepare the document. This produced some delays in starting to work on the PIF. Secondly, for some countries in our constituency, they produce a very good, beautiful PIF, but NPFE document. But in the document, the project ideas which was there, they were not retained at the Gef level as being not Gefable. So they had to go back and restart an exercise. And this, what happened, there were stakeholders' grievances, because they've been consulted, they've been engaged, and they thought that the projects will move forward in the PIF, and it wasn't retained, and then the country had to rework another proposal, things like that. So in this phase, we would prefer that we do the national consultations. We can produce a simple report of the project ideas discussion, but then after the consultation, if we can move directly to the PIF preparation, so that we don't spend time in producing a NPFE report as last time and then start working on PIF. This will avoid delays in starting to programming phase and implementation, and then also we will ensure that whatever we are preparing is in line with the Gef Secretariat programming directions. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I want to call on Rashid.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to share with you one concern that was raised with our constituency as to the program in a general manner. Indeed, it might be weird to talk about it on the day before the General Assembly, but the capacity as formulating eligible projects is a constraint for countries, not only for our constituency, but also in others. And it is a statement that is also seen in the agencies, because the agencies sometimes do not mobilize consultants that might be able to prepare projects, or when they find the consultants, it's one consultant that is working on several projects at the same time. So the issue of capacity in order to formulate eligible projects, I think that has an impact in a very profound manner on the quality of the project in the implementation phase. So during the evaluation processes, did we evaluate or assess the capacities for the countries? And if so, what were the results? But we should take into consideration this thing. It is serious, and if the support program could help these insufficiencies, training of trainers, for instance, if a core of experts in the country were available, maybe they could be used by the agencies, so we wouldn't have to look for consultants elsewhere, but in the region nor in the world or globally. This is a consideration that we should take, envisage. I don't know how to formulate it, but let's find the best solution on this. Second thing, for the private sector, I also think that the support, country support program could bring something to the countries to promote the participation of the private sector in this in the Gef process in country. Thank you.
Let's now hear from private CSO representative.
Thank you, Madam. The Gef CSO network appreciates the Council decision on this country support program implementation arrangement for Gef 7. this is one of the greatest decisions to make Gef's contribution globally visible. This is our understanding, and we highly appreciate it. In regard to the national dialogues, Gef CSO network would like to recommend that we want to work with small grant programs at the country level to organize local level consultations connecting to the national level. Our objective to see how to maximize the greatest effort from the grassroots level to the national level, come to the global level. And we strongly believe that such participatory approach connecting to the local to the national level will add value to achieve the decision of the new vision of civil society network taken by the last council. Secondly, about the workshops, there are excellent examples that Gef established. In the ECW, the government and civil society, they can sit together. This is one excellent example of participation. Come together, learn from each other, build trust, and go together. So, and also we appreciate that in the Gef 7 architecture, that it confirms 2 civil society representatives' participation. In this regard, we also appreciate that it made it inclusive, bringing private sector, bringing academia into this process. And we have already recognized that NGO, civil society current level, they have been contributing very significantly. To having only 2 representatives from each country, that limits the opportunity. So we would want to recommend add kindly 1 more representative from civil society and or private sector, so that makes total 3 representatives to make more meaningful contribution, because we are having opportunity to discuss in advance only. That is the ECW option we take to discuss, to learn from each other and share. And this will also directly add value coming back to the reflection to the national consultation that we conducted, and also from the reflecting to the implementation level at the local level. So we believe it will help to achieve more better meaningful way to quantify how much Gef is contributing. Currently, most of the reflections are coming from the HGP level. The medium size and large size programs, it does not really reflect as the HGP is reflecting. But this new mechanism, this we consider as the new paradigm of partnership. This new paradigm of partnership is going to make a very good impact. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So let us respond. Just a second. There is one more. Sorry, I missed your flag, Adincho.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I thought I'm going to lost somewhere again as yesterday. Well, it is nice to hear from the donor perspective to allocate more resource on a national. Let me 1 minute. Oh God, where is it gone? Oh yes, the national dialogues rather than introductory seminars and other workshops. And then I just present in the constituency, I'm going to take Mongolia as a case. Sometimes we use small grant programs as a national country profiling or country supporting program allocation to get more consultative meetings in order to attract private sector and civil societies and NGOs and youth as well. So I think just 1.7 million for those countries who are interested to be part of that national dialogue. It's too small and then a bit of 13 million on a workshop. That is maybe something that we can shift, but still I think it should be clear enough. And during the constituency meeting, many countries expressed to register and to submit their request to National Dialogues Fund. So I think, as UK said, 1.7 is too small for developing and less developing countries. So if the Gef could consider that fact, it would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Hi, Mr. Mann, please.
Maybe have quite a little knowledge about how to develop this budget. So, I mean, there's something, should be somewhere in the document which we have approved to reflect the $21 million for CSP. Because I couldn't find it. And I appreciate if you could point out where this bunch of budget is reflected in our document. And the second one is do you have the breakdown year to year for allocation of this $21 million? Although it's quite a small amount of money, but I'm asking for the idea and the methodology. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Quite important questions.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Chair. Well, let me first address the initial questions of both Joss, since they agreed, which had to do with highlighting the importance of national dialogue in general for front-loading strategic thinking about Gef programs at the country level. And indeed, we certainly agree that in Gef 7, where we're trying to reach a higher level of ambition, it is even more necessary. So with all of that, we clearly agree. So we do agree that national dialogues are an absolute critical and urgent element of engagement under the country support program. And what you have in there, both in terms of estimates in numbers per year or in financial implications, in fact, are based on historical requests. We hope to see those requests increase, right? The Gef has never denied a dialogue opportunity to any country. So countries who want a dialogue will get a dialogue, and the restrictive factor on that will not be resources, because dialogues are actually cheap to deploy, because we don't move a lot of people. We move a few people from the Gef to the country, right? So that's actually quite cheap to do. Dialogues are actually quite cheap to deploy. We don't deny them, and the limiting factor may be the Gef staff rather than the financial availability. So that's the context a little bit. That's why the amount planned there is rather small, based on mostly historical data, but also based on the fact that what is represented here as Gef workshops is in fact quite flexible in nature. It's described in a small paragraph. It can involve a number of events that are either regional in nature or thematic in nature. It could support some of the multi-country gatherings that will be required around the IP platforms. So it can also support elements of dialogues and relay the need for country dialogue. The two categories could technically be merged as well without restriction. A lot of this will have to be responsive to the way countries wish to engage dialogue with us around the new elements of the program. Now, in that context, the NPFEs are still an option and available, and they're, in our mind, not terribly different from national dialogue, except in terms of formalism. And on this one, we hear the the point made by the representative of Madagascar that in the context of Gef 7, it might be more important to reach an urgent and broad-based strategic decision on how to approach the Gef 7 program than to necessarily produce a very formal report. And I think it's a very good question. We also realize that capacity is a limitation in as mentioned by Morocco, in certain countries, and that the capacity to actually declinate feasible projects that are Gefable, right, given the program offering, is limited. And therefore, we do agree that front-loading as many dialogue as possible, being in a situation to answer positively the call for from countries on this is very important. If anything, we want more of it, and we are disappointed by the level of request. So I think it's certainly an avenue that we should encourage, we should finance, we should never restrict, and we should try to, in this context, front-load in the first year as much as possible. So that's the first element. The 10 is an average, and we expect them to happen early rather than late. I think there's more benefit to having them early. So the issue of NPFCs and NPFEs versus dialogue is more of a terminology, and I think we'll be responsive to countries who want a process, a broad-based process, engaging communities as much as possible, engaging quality conversations. We just had 2 such dialogues recently, one in Vietnam and one in Benin, on request from the countries. It's a very constructive way to get together to think about the future. On the successfulness of the program and the need for an evaluation, we certainly agree with that. In fact, there was an evaluation envisaged by IEO a couple of years back, which somehow has not happened. We would very much welcome, and I understand it's part of their work program, but we would very much welcome having it and engaging with them on that. What we have in the meantime is the feedback of countries and the feedback of ECWs and constituency meeting participants, which are tracked and are typically fairly positive, as mentioned in the report. But there is a need for a more systematic evaluation. There is a need for some more rethinking of how the program responds to the Gef 7 context, and I think that work needs to be moving ahead. On the private sector, I think it's a very interesting comment, and it's certainly aligned with the philosophy and the efforts and the ambition of Gef 7, that in the many events that take place, the voice of the private sector would be very welcome as part of a broadening of constituencies, and we're very open-minded to thinking in those terms. So that's a direction for evolution that we're listening to as well. Maybe take the question on the GCF, please. Yeah.
Thank you. One of the questions was about working together with GCF, and in fact we have had meetings between the 2 secretariats. This issue came up, and we started testing. In fact, 1 year ago, a bit more of a year ago, when we had an ECW here in Da Nang, was the first time that we had a representative from the GCF come and talk about, how this work could be done, what's happening in the GCF as compared to what's happening in the GEF. So we got the ball rolling at that point. Then we've tried to see, could we do the events that bring the same kind of people together back to back, so that we can also save on resources, because if you do them back to back, you save on travel, you save on time. And in fact, it did work once in the Pacific. Of course, there's sometimes a little bit of difficulty because the way the structured regional workshops of the GCF are put together is quite different from the constituency workshops that we do. The composition is not the same, the objectives are not necessarily the same. So it's not exactly, they don't exactly fit together perfectly. But we continue to find ways to be present at each other's events. There's one at the end of July that the GCF is organizing and where we have been invited, and we'll see if we can make it. So we're working on it. It's a work in progress. It's a work that we understand is good. The articulation between the two has to increase, and we will continue to do that.
Sorry, on the point raised by China on budget construction, this is based on historical cost and on bottom-up construction of the budget, right? Most of these elements of the program are a regular expectation of the Gef partnership, right? So we have 2 meetings, 2 Gef constituency meetings per year. The number of participants is predefined. We know the cost, and that's how we build it up, right? We have 1 offering per year of introductory seminars in Washington, and so we know the cost of that as well. We know the average cost of a national dialogue. The variations that we are susceptible to encounter are not linked to cost or to attendance, because these things have been agreed or pre-agreed and maintained, and we're not proposing to change them in any major way. But what could change is the level of demand on dialogues, for instance, and we will encourage that, and it's not a major cost driver. What will change under GF workshops, which is a category right now that includes ECW, Extended Constituency Workshops, of which we do an offering on a regular basis, so we know exactly the cost. But what could change there is the more flexible type of workshop that could be done at the regional level, or on a thematic basis, or around an IP platform, to enable the process of getting partners together to move a more integrated and multinational concept. And so those are less predictable, and they are essentially here in the budget line in the workshop section. We'll have to manage within feasibility, obviously, and to go with the elements that will turn out to be the most worthwhile in terms of productivity. So that's how the budget is put together. It is linked to the fact that we have a big historical basis for this, and that there are very clear expectations in terms of attendance and volumes, right?
Jos?
Thanks for those comments from colleagues, helpful, and from the Secretariat. I think this is one instance where we do not want the past to be a guide for the future, either from the point of view of budgeting or from the point of view of programming. Rather, we want a substantial change. As I said, if we're going to wind up with north of 50% of total programming either being in IPs or in cross-focal area programming, which had already got to 40% in Gef 6. So in a sense, countries and agencies are voting with their feet on this question. The level of sophistication is already increasing, and so the complexity and the difficulty increases with it. OPS said that. If we do this well, we get more results. If we do it badly, we're at risk of getting less. So it works well if we do it well. And so this first part here, I see that I think you're suggesting that A and B here are essentially fungible. Dialogues and workshops can just be all, it could be one heading, more along the portfolio exercise. I get constituency meetings and I see pre-council meetings. Those are necessary on an ongoing basis for countries to consider policy questions that might be coming up through the whole council series. I don't really know what an introduction seminar is, I've got to say. I'm still a bit in the dark about that. But this for me lacks some of the crispness that some of the other papers have had. And I appreciate we gave you a hell of a lot to do with the Gef 7 policy recommendations. And in the main, this is all going very smoothly. But this bit just seems to be not quite well cooked. And I'm trying to think what I should do to the decision to amend it. But I don't think it's quite fit yet. If we're all right from a budgetary point of view, and people think that we should be using this amount of money on constituency meetings and so on, that's fine. I'll be guided by recipients on that basis. But I'm really particularly concerned about A and B and how much resource we mobilise in the next months to help with the Gef 7 programming. And so I'd like to talk about that with you, I think probably offline, and think about it a bit more before deciding on this. That's for my part. Others will have their perspectives.
So if that is, if there is no other voices, I actually understand very well that what you are trying to get, and maybe we will have a conversation overnight and to see how we could actually reflect the point actually that made not only by you too, but several people, and would like to see that how we can make that paper much crisper, so that we can have a common underground understanding underground that going forward. Because I fully agree that we shouldn't miss this opportunity. We would like to use this CSP to as creating, laying out the foundation for the very important, sophisticated the program for next 4 years. So I think that we share that your ambition, and that maybe paper really doesn't do good justice to that, but maybe we have some way to fix it. And so we will come back to you, but let's have some, dialogue tonight.
Okay, colleagues, I think that concludes discussion of that agenda item with NAOCO's commitment to come back in the morning. So we have one final item on the agenda for today, agenda item 20 on strengthening consultations with civil society. Now there are two elements to this paper. One, the topic to be addressed with CSOs on the day preceding the 55th Council meeting in December later this year. And then the second, which follows up earlier discussions in Council about the selection of CSO representatives for this meeting and for the Gef Assembly, and the guidelines by which that process was conducted. So with that, I'm afraid it's back to you, Françoise. You've had a tough afternoon, but we're nearly there. So Françoise, please, if you can introduce the paper, after which we'll take views from the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the Secretariat, I'm pleased to introduce the paper titled Strengthening Consultation with Civil Society, proposed topic for discussion at the 55th Gef Council meeting. This paper presents a proposed topic to be addressed at the consultations with CSOs on the day preceding the 55th Council meeting to be held in December 2018. Let me clarify as well that the Council in its deliberation may choose to select a different topic. This paper is a response to the updated vision to enhance civil society engagement with the Gef, which states that to enable adequate preparation, Gef Council will select consultation meeting topics approximately 6 months or 1 meeting in advance of each consultation meeting. So that's what we're doing for the first time since the updated vision has been adopted at the last Council meeting. The proposed topic for consultation is connecting environmental impact and gender equality, given the relevance of this topic to the civil society community, and particularly the recent and very important developments in the Gef's approach to gender, with the recently approved policy and a newly approved strategy and action plan. So that's the proposal we're submitting for decision to Council, and we stand ready to receive advice and alternative suggestions if that's the Council's view. Let me also note that the paper includes an annex, and that annex provides a summary of the actions taken to date by the Gef Secretariat in terms of the selection of the CSO representative at the 54th Council meeting and the 6th Gef Assembly. This process follows the guidelines and criteria contained in the updated vision paper and has been practiced along the lines of the updated vision paper for the first time in the context of this Council. So the recommended Council decision is the following. The Gef Council, having considered the document, selects the following topic to be addressed as part of the consultation in the next Council meeting to take place in December 2018, connecting environmental impact and gender equality. Thank you.
Thank you, Françoise. And I see Marita's flag up. Marita, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I can be very brief. We strongly support the selection of the subject for the consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Marita. Colleagues, any other questions or comments at this time? In the absence of those, may we move forward? Oh, sorry, yes. Thank you. The CSO network representative, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I may also add a comment on the point of the wider representation of civil society first, before addressing the topic for the conference. We, the CSO network, welcome and support the wider and larger representation of civil society organizations at this council meeting and the 6th Gef Assembly as a result of an extensive outreach process in order to strengthen your consultations with civil society. By extending the additional invitation to attend the Assembly and this council meeting to non-Gef CSO members, these additional CSOs, which are active in their own countries and other regional networks, have been introduced to the Gef CSO network. As a result, it is expected they will become members of the Gef CSO network, and by virtue of their expertise and experience they bring with them, will add to the Gef CSO network's strength and expansion at the national, regional, and global levels, and thereby further contribute to your objectives. Increasing the representation of CSOs at the national level will enable enhanced implementation of Gef projects. In this regard, we hope Gef will provide resources to further enhance a CSO's capacity on Gef issues at the national level. In addition, we propose for hosting of regional preparatory meetings prior to council meetings and Gef Assembly, either on a face-to-face basis or through webinars. These measures will also strengthen your consultations with civil society. With regard to the conference to be held at the Gef 55th Council meeting at the year end, we welcome and support the topic of connecting environmental impact and gender equality. We urge for there to be wide and diverse representation of women's constituencies, including indigenous women and those actively involved with local communities. In order to obtain optimal results for this event, we propose the hosting of pre-conference training, focus groups discussions, and preparatory meetings on its core areas prior to the event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and I think as you would have hopefully heard at this council meeting and in previous council meetings, the council very much appreciates the value add that the CSO network brings to our deliberations, both at the meetings, in preparation for them, and in following afterwards. And through you, if I can just send a message on behalf of the council that we absolutely value the CSO network as a critical part of the Gef partnership. So we're pleased to hear your positive response to the changes that we've made for Gef 6 and the Assembly, and we look forward to your full and engaged commitment for Gef 7. So, colleagues, are we therefore able to accept the decision and look forward to the CSO Day around connecting environmental impact and gender equality in December? Excellent. Thank you very much, Françoise. Thank you. Colleagues, that actually now concludes the afternoon session. Just a couple of points about the agenda. We have two items that we'll be bringing back tomorrow. Agenda item 18, the Small Grants Programme, and agenda item 19, the Country Support Programme. One other reminder, the first session tomorrow morning is an executive session, the SRC item. That's due to start, I think, at 8:30 in the programme. Given we have 2 additional items to come back, and we are aiming for to wrap by 12:30 tomorrow, can I please encourage everyone to be here on time and ready to start at 8:30? And with that, I'll ask William to just give us a bit of housekeeping.
Thank you very much, Chair, for reminding us of the meeting tomorrow morning. The SRC meeting is executive session. That means it's closed. It is only for council members, alternates, and their advisors. All observers and the Secretariat will not have access to the room. It will not be broadcast or recorded. Now, in order to be able to do that, to hold that meeting, we have to have a quorum. So please be here on time, because if we can't get the quorum, we can't get the meeting going. So let me stress those 2 points for your knowledge tomorrow. In the evening, we have the side events, including one on a new e-learning course for the GF down in Ballroom 1. So there's plenty of activity, but no social cocktails or receptions. So you're free to go and enjoy dinner on the town.
No, we have
that what?
I think
I've just mentioned that we're going to have this side event about knowledge, and they will have their cocktail, but there's nothing officially organized either by the government or the Gef Secretariat as a grand thing for everybody. Okay? Thank you. All right. So having clarified that point, we close the meeting. Thank you very much.